Hello. Today, we'd like to talk a little bit about Panasonic's camera lineup, what I would like to see them improve, and the one thing that I think Panasonic needs to do if they want to become relevant in the larger professional video space. Our goal here is not to be negative towards the cameras in question, and in fact, we're going to cover a lot of our favorite things about them as well as the negatives. If you like the idea, please subscribe, like the video, and leave us a comment about what camera brands you'd like us to talk about next. Having two cameras that do slightly different things is a very common sight in the industry these days. You'll often see people running around with a little run-and-gun B camera, and then having a larger rigged-up A cam ready for the more considered setups, tripod or dolly stuff for interviews. My two cameras happen to be Panasonics at the moment. I've got here the Panasonic S5 and the box version of the S1H. These two cameras currently represent the two ends of Panasonic's hybrid camera lineup. The BS1H is a camera rig-friendly box-shaped version of the S1H. It has the same sensor with an optical low-pass filter, which are amazing for video and has low-key become one of my favorite features on cinema cameras. It has great Netflix-approved internal recording modes, but lacks the viewfinder, IBIS, and the screen. But it swaps these things out with more professional I/O ports. The S5, on the other hand, is the cheapest camera in Panasonic's full-frame lineup. And while it has the same sensor as the S1H and the BS1H, it lacks many of the higher quality internal recording modes. It doesn't have true cinema 24p, and it also unfortunately lacks the optical low-pass filter. I know to many the lack of an OLPF doesn't sound like a big deal, but I can personally see the subtle difference that it makes to images. This makes for a great corporate B-roll setup and a terrific B camera to put on a gimbal with the BS1H as the A camera. It has IBIS, it does 5.9K RAW video, but in a much smaller and lighter package. Technologically, the big win for Panasonic is that if you look at the online lab tests, the Panasonics typically outshoot their competitors like the Sonys or Canons for usable dynamic range. And Taylor and I have certainly found this to be true shooting our videos here. Additionally, I think that 6K full frame is the sweet spot for video, and I especially enjoy the anamorphic recording modes in a world where tall video is becoming more common. I also like the inclusion of more professional video tools that Panasonic have in their cameras that you'd normally only see on dedicated video cameras. I'd love to end things here by saying that the S5 and the S1H combo is incredible, and everyone should run out and invest in this ecosystem even going into 2024, especially with the S5 II having usable autofocus and the rumored S1H2 presumably coming soon. But I think that there are some things that they could work on. To start with, it would be nice to see a false color tool and a camera body with internal NDs, which rumors say may happen. I'd also like to see even just one XLR port. Those are pretty big wish list items for me, and I'd love to see Panasonic step up and include them in a higher-end video body. I think lacking the waveform tool on the BS1H is a silly omission on their part, as the other cameras in the S range have it. Speaking of, if they did make a new BS1H, I'd love a screen, even a little flippy one or an optional accessory. I'd also like to see highlight recovery added to the RAW recordings on older cameras. Seeing as they've added it to the S5 II, I think it may be possible. Lastly, more tall sensor recording modes would be nice. A 24p 4:3 mode that's nearly full height in RAW should be possible. We've seen it in some of the other cameras using the same sensor, and it'd be epic to have it. As you can probably tell, those are reasonably nitpicky things. The larger issue here is that the rolling shutter and high frame rate performance is lagging behind the competition. I think Panasonic could consider adding wide crop modes for slow motion recording, like a full resolution 239 to 160p full frame mode. Other cameras do this, and it's a nice way to get more high frame rate options without windowing down to Super 35 or pixel binning. A bigger misstep for me, in my opinion, is having RAW but then not supporting said RAW at true cinema 24p. This is a deal breaker for international cinema use because the video file standard to project in cinema is 24p, not 2398 or whatever. Some theaters physically cannot play other frame rates, so this is a bit of a bummer. But there's actually one more important issue that I think Panasonic needs to address if they want to be successful in the professional narrative and commercial video space. Panasonic is currently missing a real high-end video camera that looks the part on larger sets to give the rest of their lineup the brand recognition that legitimizes them as a viable option in the industry. The VeraCam and the EVA 1 were fantastic, but they're outdated. In comparison, Blackmagic Pocket Cinema cameras and Sony's FX3, for example, are looked at less reluctantly than Panasonic's offerings in this regard. I think when you look at Blackmagic, you see that they have their Ursas that add legitimacy to the Pocket product line. And Sony has the Venice and the FX9 and other bigger cameras that add legitimacy to something like the FX6 or the FX3 or FX30. In my experience, you can take an FX3 onto a commercial set and people view it as a baby FX6 or even a tiny baby Venice, as silly as that sounds. But Panasonic do not currently have a flagship camera that adds to that brand power to the lower end cameras, in my opinion, and that's a shame. But anyway, that was my last point. Thanks for tuning in. Let us know if there's anything that you'd like to see Panasonic tackle next. I hope some of this has been interesting, and we'll see you next time.